Welcome, everyone. Today we are diving into a foundational pillar of Microsoft Entra ID, configuring and managing custom domains. A well-planned domain strategy is the bedrock of secure hybrid identities, seamless user experiences, and enterprise-grade authentication. Let us get started. Welcome to our first module on domain management. When you spin up a Microsoft Entra tenant, it comes out of the box with an initial domain name, ending in .onmicrosoft.com. Think of this as your tenant's permanent routing address under the hood. However, for a professional, production-ready environment, you do not want your users logging in with that long, generic suffix. This is exactly what custom domains are for. A custom domain allows you to link your organization's real-world DNS name, like contoso.com, directly to your Entra tenant. This slide outlines the what and the basics. We start with the initial domain, which cannot be deleted or changed, and then we layer custom domains on top of it to align with your corporate branding. It is the very first step in setting up a mature identity boundary in the cloud. As we go through this training, keep in mind that domains act as the anchor for user principal names, proxy addresses, and application identifiers. Looking at the diagram on your screen, we have a clear visual hierarchy of how domains are structured within a Microsoft Entra tenant. At the very top, representing the core boundary, is the Microsoft Entra tenant itself. Flowing directly down from the tenant is the initial domain. This is that permanent .onmicrosoft.com address that Microsoft assigns you on day one. Notice how it serves as the foundational layer. Branching out to the right, we see the custom domains. These represent your verified organizational domains, like contoso.com or fabricum.org. The diagram illustrates that while the initial domain is a fixed, undeletable entity, you can attach multiple custom domains to the exact same tenant. These custom domains are what your users and applications will interact with daily. It is a simple but vital architecture: one tenant, one initial domain, and an array of flexible, brand-specific custom domains extending your identity perimeter. Now let us discuss the why and when of configuring custom domains. Why go through the effort of adding a custom domain? First and foremost is user experience and brand trust. If an employee is asked to sign in to billa@contoso.onmicrosoft.com, it causes confusion and reduces trust. By using your actual corporate domain, the login experience is seamless and professional. Second, it is critical for hybrid identity synchronization. If your on-premises Active Directory uses contoso.com, you want your cloud identities to match perfectly. When should you configure this? The absolute best practice is to add and verify your custom domains before you ever begin synchronizing users from your on-premises environment using Microsoft Entra Connect. If you sync a user before verifying their domain in the cloud, Microsoft Entra ID will automatically overwrite their user principal name suffix with the initial OnMicrosoft domain, creating a messy cleanup job. Therefore, step one of any migration is domain verification. This flowchart illustrates the critical decision point regarding the when of domain verification. It starts with the initial setup phase of your sync engine. From there, we hit a crucial decision node. Are custom domains verified before syncing? If the answer is no, follow the red path. You will see that the Microsoft Entra Connect sync engine detects the unverified suffix, falls back to the default initial domain, and results in a mismatched, confusing user principal name for the end user. If the answer is yes, follow the green path. Because the domain is pre-verified, the synchronization engine matches the on-premises UPN exactly with the cloud UPN, resulting in a seamless and consistent identity. This visual perfectly encapsulates why timing is everything when configuring your Microsoft Entra domains. Always secure the green path by prioritizing domain verification. Let us get practical. How exactly do we add and verify a custom domain? The process involves a secure handshake between Microsoft Entra ID and your public DNS registrar. First, you sign in to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center as at least a domain name administrator. You navigate to the Custom Domain Names blade and select Add Custom Domain. You enter your domain name. At this point, Microsoft Entra ID generates a unique verification challenge, typically a TXT or MX record, which includes a specific MS equals value. Your next step is to log into your DNS registrar and publish this TXT record to your public DNS zone. We recommend setting the time to live, or TTL, to 3,600 seconds. Finally, you return to the Entra Admin Center and click Verify. Microsoft queries the public DNS, finds the matching TXT record, and confirms your ownership. A deep dive tip: if you encounter a domain name conflict error, it means another tenant or Azure resource is already using that exact namespace. Our sequence diagram maps out the exact technical handshake required for domain verification. On the left, we have you, the administrator. In the middle, the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. On the right, your external DNS registrar. The flow begins with the administrator adding the domain name in the Entra portal. The Entra portal responds by generating a unique TXT challenge record. The administrator takes this record and creates a new DNS entry at the external registrar. Once the DNS propagation occurs, the administrator clicks Verify in Entra. Behind the scenes, Microsoft Entra actively queries the DNS registrar to check for that specific TXT record. Once the registrar returns the correct value, Entra validates the ownership and updates the domain status to verified. This step-by-step visual demystifies the external dependencies involved in domain management. Once you have multiple domains verified, how does Microsoft Entra ID know which one to use by default? This brings us to the concept of the primary domain. The primary domain is the default domain name that populates automatically when an administrator creates a new user or a new Microsoft 365 group directly in the portal. Out of the box, your initial on Microsoft domain is flagged as the primary domain. To streamline administrative workflows, you should change the primary domain to your main verified custom domain. You can do this easily in the Admin Center by selecting your verified domain and clicking Make Primary. A crucial point to understand here is that changing the primary domain does not retroactively change the user principal names of existing users. It solely acts as the new default template for future object creation. Also, be aware that you can only set a domain as primary if it is a managed domain, meaning it relies on Entra ID for authentication, rather than being federated to an on-premises system. Let us walk through the state diagram illustrating the primary domain mechanics. At the top, we have the tenant domain configuration. The administrator sets a specific verified domain as the primary domain. The diagram branches to show the two resulting behaviors in your environment. On the right branch, we see existing users. Notice that it explicitly states no retroactive changes applied. Their current user principal names and email addresses are untouched. On the left branch, we see new user provisioning. Because this domain is now the primary, any net new user created via the portal automatically defaults to this domain suffix. This visualization helps clarify a very common misconception that changing the primary domain performs a bulk tenant-wide rename. As the diagram clearly outlines, it only influences the provisioning of new objects, saving time and reducing manual entry errors. Now for a deep dive into advanced domain management, handling subdomains and authentication types. When you add a root domain like contoso.com to Entra ID, any subdomain you add later, such as child.contoso.com, automatically inherits the authentication settings of that root domain. If your root domain is set to federated, meaning it relies on an on-premises Active Directory Federation Services infrastructure for login, your subdomain will also be forced into a federated state. But what if you want the subdomain to be managed natively in the cloud, in the Entra Admin Center? This action will fail with a property error. The solution requires utilizing the Microsoft Graph API. By making an API call, you can promote the subdomain to be treated as an independent root domain in Entra ID, completely breaking the inheritance. This allows you to set the subdomain's authentication type to managed, isolating it from the parent domain's federation rules. This is a critical technique for complex enterprise architectures. This diagram captures the complex relationship between root domains and subdomains regarding authentication types. On the left side, we see the default behavior. The root domain is configured as federated. When subdomain 1 is added, the solid line indicates automatic inheritance, forcing subdomain 1 to also be federated. Now look at the right side of the diagram. We introduce subdomain 2, but this time, the administrator intervenes using the Microsoft Graph API. The dashed line symbol represents the API executing an update command. This action breaks the inheritance link, visually severing the connection to the root domain's policies. As a result, subdomain 2 is elevated to its own root status and successfully configured as managed for cloud-native authentication. This graphic is a powerful tool to understand how to bypass default inheritance limitations using programmatic administrative tools. Let us further explore how on-premises domain suffixes interact with cloud domains during synchronization, specifically focusing on the user principal name, or UPN. The UPN is the standard internet communication attribute that users type in to sign in. During a Microsoft Entra Connect sync cycle, the engine looks at the on-premises UPN suffix. If that suffix matches a verified domain in your Entra tenant, the user is seamlessly created with that exact UPN. But if the on-premises suffix is non-routable like contoso.local or simply has not been verified in the cloud, Microsoft Entra ID executes a fallback mechanism. It calculates a new UPN by taking the user's mail nickname, attribute, and attaching the initial on Microsoft domain suffix. This creates a massive disconnect between what the user types at their desk and what they type into Microsoft 365. To prevent this, you must thoroughly verify your domains in the cloud before syncing, or use an alternate login ID configuration. Here we have a logic flow diagram demonstrating the UPN synchronization routing. We begin at the top with an on-premises user object preparing to sync. The engine extracts the user's UPN suffix and asks a fundamental question. Is this suffix a verified domain in Microsoft Entra ID? If we follow the yes path to the left, the user is provisioned with a matching, clean cloud UPN. The identity is consistent. If we follow the no path to the right, perhaps because the domain is a .local address or simply unverified, the engine triggers its fallback protocol. It grabs the mail nickname attribute, appends the default initial tenant domain, and generates a fallback UPN shown in red. This diagram is an excellent troubleshooting reference. Whenever you see a user with an unexpected on Microsoft login, you can trace this exact flow and immediately know that the source domain was not properly verified prior to synchronization. There comes a time when you need to remove a custom domain, perhaps due to a corporate rebranding or a domain expiration. Deleting a domain in Microsoft Entra ID is strictly governed by dependency checks. You cannot delete a domain if any user, group, or enterprise application still references it in their email, proxy address, or app ID URI. Normally, you must meticulously hunt down and update every referencing object before the deletion succeeds. However, for bulk cleanups, Microsoft offers the Force Delete option via the Azure portal or Microsoft Graph API. If there are fewer than 1,000 references to the domain, Force Delete asynchronously sweeps through the tenant, automatically renaming the UPNs and email addresses of affected objects back to the initial default domain, and then deletes the custom domain. Be cautious. This operation will fail if there are over 1,000 objects, or if any of the affected applications are multi-tenant apps. Proper domain hygiene and planning are paramount here. This decision tree outlines the domain deletion lifecycle and the Force Delete safety mechanisms. Starting at the top, the admin initiates a domain deletion. The system immediately checks for dependencies. If no dependencies exist, the flow moves straight to a successful deletion. If dependencies are found, we move to the next evaluation node. Are there fewer than 1,000 references? If the answer is no, the system strictly blocks the operation, requiring manual cleanup by the admin, shown in red. If yes, the system permits the use of the Force Delete operation. Following that path, you see the automated actions. User UPNs are renamed to the default domain, group emails are reset, and app URIs are updated. Only after these dependencies are automatically neutralized does the custom domain get successfully removed. It is a highly orchestrated safety net designed to prevent orphaned identity records. To synthesize everything we have learned, let us look at a critical real-time use case: mergers and acquisitions. Imagine your company, Contoso, acquires Fabricam. The business mandate is that Fabricam employees must immediately access Contoso's cloud resources, but they must absolutely retain their @fabricam.com email and login identities to prevent business disruption. To execute this, you first add and verify fabricam.com as a custom domain within your existing Contoso Entra tenant, proving ownership via DNS-TXT records. Next, you configure Microsoft Entra Connect to synchronize the newly acquired Fabricam Active Directory forest into your tenant. Because fabricam.com is now a verified domain, the acquired users sync seamlessly with their exact native UPNs, completely avoiding the on-Microsoft fallback trap we discussed earlier. Finally, you can optionally promote the domain to managed if you are deprecating their old on-premises federation servers. This scenario proves how mastering domain management directly enables rapid, secure business integrations. Our final diagram illustrates the mergers and acquisitions architecture we just discussed. In the center, acting as the unified hub, is the Contoso Microsoft Entra tenant. On the left side, we have the original Contoso infrastructure, the on-premises Active Directory syncing seamlessly to the verified contoso.com domain. On the right side, we introduce the acquired entity, Fabricum. You can see their separate on-premises Active Directory pushing data through Microsoft Entra Connect. Because the administrator has already established Fabricum.com as a verified custom domain inside the Contoso tenant, the identities flow directly into their designated namespace. The visual perfectly demonstrates how a single Microsoft Entra tenant can act as a multi-domain umbrella, securely housing completely distinct brand identities while providing unified access to cloud applications and resources.